On this edition of the Booth Review, how about some Marcus Magic in Dallas, London?
Oh, and we got a new contender for Big Fletcher's Heavyweight Commanders Championship belt.
And we've got a playoff game to get ready for. A rematch from week 1 against Tampa. You ready?
Oh, come on, playoffs! It's all coming up next on the Booth Review.
Welcome into the regular season ending playoff preview edition of the Booth Review podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein with Big Fletch. London Fletcher, we are brought to you by Microsoft Surface, powering a better game, and we're both remote. London, of course, is at home in Charlotte. I didn't come into the studio today because we're all snowmies this week with all the snow. And I got to tell you, London, we pulled off 2 buzzer beaters yesterday, Marcus Mariota to Terry McLaurin. And the pilot who got us back from Dallas before there was a flake on the ground last night. It was amazing.
Hey, that's true to form, man. Would you expect anything less from this team? And obviously that pilot just getting you guys in safely. That was the main thing. That I'm glad to hear that you're safe at your home. Now I will say this, man. Bram, you tell me you're tough, and you couldn't toughen it out and head to the park and record from the studio.
I could, but I don't know how much you remember about the plowing services of the Washington, D.C. metro area. They weren't going to let me get to the park. So that's a DMV issue that needs to be dealt with, not a me issue, right?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, to the flight crew, once again, they fall under the DQ mantra of anybody, anywhere, anytime, got us back in time to do this show. So I appreciate that. All right. Yeah. We got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, we know who the playoff opponent is, Tampa. We saw them in week 1, so we'll get to a lot of that today. But let's start with what happened in Dallas, which is the end of the season was on the nose, true to form, Magic again. It is every week. It's uncanny. It's amazing. I've never seen a team as clutch as this throughout the course of a season.
No, not at all. And four straight games that have come down to the final play, and just the way this season has gone. You mentioned the Magic. In this particular game, we've gone accustomed to it being Jaden Daniels producing at the end of games, but it was Mariota coming in off the bench, coming out of the bullpen, and really the offense didn't have anything going in the first half, and he came in and was able to really spark, and he made some plays. The touchdown run, the fourth down play that he made right before throwing the touchdown to Terry, man, he made some outstanding plays. Defensively, we'll get into that and how they were able to, the parts they played and helping us get that victory yesterday. But another great finish if you're a Washington Commanders fan.
Yeah, let's go backwards. I want to start with the last drive. So again, and I want to say this first because now that we're at the end of the season, and I don't think it's been acknowledged yet, that for all these things to happen, obviously the players have to make great plays and the decisions have to be made quickly and efficiently, which is what I want to get to here for a second. Like, this team made a big deal of bringing in people to support the staff, to make game management decisions, to make time management decisions. Dan Quinn's been open about talking about this type of stuff. Dave Gardy was brought in as a rules expert to help them understand the officiating crews that they're working with, the game conditions they're working with. And I think that the payoff of that has been obvious because it's, I want to credit the players. Obviously, they have to execute all this stuff and do these things. But the way that they've handled all of these late game situations have allowed them the opportunity to execute it. And yesterday was perfect example of it, where they got one timeout. They know they have to use it before they probably really where they want to. They know they only have one play. They know they have to spike the ball. They know that they can't actually regroup and take a timeout and think about what they want to do. They call themselves into a one-on-one with their best receiver and execute the play. The operation deserves some credit here because it's not miracles every week that they're winning by. They're executing properly, and it starts on the sideline and up in the booth, who's ever is working with them to get through all these end game situations as well.
Yeah, well, go back. You talked about going back. Go back to in the early winter when Josh Harris had his press conference, and he talked about winning on the fringes because everybody's operating from the same salary cap. And he talked about winning on the fringes outside, so things that whether it's from an analytic standpoint, nutrition standpoint, sports and science. In this instance, we're talking about, you mentioned bringing in somebody to work with the game management piece of it, the times, all those types of things that they've hired and brought onto staff to assist in those processes. And they practice these situations all the time. DQ talked about that, how they practice these scenarios all the time. So it's not like you don't get into yesterday's game and that's the first time you've practiced these scenarios. They practice these things in mini camp, training camp. They still continue to practice these scenarios in the regular season. So when the moment comes, it's not too big for them because they've done it so many times. They've rehearsed for these moments so many times. I'm sure they call 2 plays. Hey, this is the play. We're going to have to spike it. We'll have to call this timeout, whatever the case may be. And there was no question in my mind that Terry was going to be the guy who got that ball at the he was going to get the opportunity. I look at it like this. You're going to give your guy, your best player, a chance to win the game, or obviously if he didn't catch it, you kick the field goal and we go to overtime. But kudos to them in the operation and them just being ready to execute because they've done these things so many times prior to yesterday.
You know, it's funny. You said this on the air, and it's the truth of it, too. How many times did Marcus Mariota actually practice that throw to Terry McLaurin over the last, 6 months? It had to be rare. Like, when was he ever getting reps with him? He never was. It's amazing.
Very, very rare. And we talked to Terry about it, and he mentioned when we interviewed him in the post game, and he talked about how earlier in the game, him and Marcus, they tried the same play, and the ball was a little bit flat or whatever. It didn't. They didn't connect. It was the timing was a little off. They got to the sideline, and Terry talked about, hey, what he could do better for Marcus, and Marcus talked about, hey, what he could do better to give Terry an opportunity, a better shot. So them guys even working it out on the sideline. But throughout the course of the week, your backup quarterback is. I've been on teams where the backup quarterback may not get 1 rep with the starters during the practice week. Then there's times where he may get 2 reps in a particular period, two reps out of 12 plays, or whatever the case may be. So there's not going to be a situation where these guys have worked over and over and over and over again to develop this type of timing, that type of touch throw, and for the kudos to those guys to be able to pull it out and make that adjustment from the first time that they missed to obviously the game winner.
Yeah. And again, I just want to reiterate, this doesn't happen over and over unless the entire operation is prepared for these moments. Right. How many times with any other example, we had one 2 weeks ago against Atlanta where Raheem Morris is answering a lot of questions about time management in both halves against Washington for the usage of timeouts, or really the lack of usage of timeouts that put them in adverse conditions when they didn't necessarily have to, or the more pronounced ones like the Bears ones where they made no sense what they were doing at the end of games and they lost games because of it. People were fired over decisions that were made there. This time management stuff, oftentimes, it may not help you win a lot of games. I think it has in this case. Oftentimes, it'll prevent you from losing. And in either case, they just deserve a lot of credit for being prepared for literally anything, because that's all we've seen this year is literally anything could happen.
Anything. And that piece of it. And it's not easy for, I know a lot of fans will look at these scenarios and say, man, he's the head coach. You've been hired as the head coach for a reason. You should understand these things. And it's so much that goes into a football game in terms of all the different things that you have to make sure you address, you wrap, the attention to details, the end of game situations, the end of half situations, all the different things. I mean, we can look at even yesterday with Mike McCarthy. He had made some questionable decisions end of half, and also even at the end of the game where they were, I think, on a 4th and 1. Yeah, they opted to take a delay of game and punt as opposed to maybe going for it. So these things are not easy, but for the entire organization and everybody who's involved with these elements, and hey, we're going to study the heck out of these scenarios, and this is how we want to. We got this much time, these timeouts, this scenario. This is when you want to call a timeout. All those types of things that you look for, and even I think there was a situation where it was, I believe it was Austin Eckler or somebody. It was a play to him, I think a run or a swing pass. Didn't gain any yards, but the best thing Austin did was he got out of bounds.
Yeah.
And that saved time, that saved having to call a timeout, all that type of thing. So even for the players to understand, like, hey, I got to get yards aren't of the utmost importance. The time is of the utmost importance.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but I do, since you mentioned the Cowboys things, there was an inconsistency to that, which I think also, like, this team is very consistent in how they want to approach things. How many times during the season do we go, oh, they're going for that? Like, there was just no question that they would, because you just kind of knew as things materialize, this is who they are. This is what they're going to do. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but this is who we are. So at the end of the first half, Dallas goes for a 4th and goal at the 2 with no time left for a chip. In lieu of a chip shot field goal, Washington makes a great defensive play, forces Trey Lance to reverse field, doesn't get enough on the ball, incomplete pass to Rico Dowdle. So the defense stood up, and the red zone defense, which I'll get into, which I think is really the reason why they ended up winning yesterday, was a big part of it. But then at the end of the second half, they get extremely conservative. Like, they were throwing caution to the wind, going for touchdowns at the end of one half when their winning time moment was to go for that 4th down. I couldn't believe they actually punted it back to us.
I don't understand it either. Again, you're not playing for anything. Why not go for it? But that's a Dallas issue. I don't know if they want, like, even at the end of half. Is it a situation where you're trying to get Trey Lance these reps? Is it you want to get him to see how he operates in these type of situations?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the case, but the decision to not go for it at the end of the game, 4th and 1, I'm grateful and thankful that they opted to do that, because gave us a great chance. But and they also could have been looking at it like, hey, for the most part, the defense has done a good job. We're going to lean on our defense and see if they can close out this game and get a victory for it. So these are questions that Dallas has to answer. Mike McCarthy has to answer. But from our standpoint, I'm glad they opted to do that, and fortunate to the way our guys executed in that situation. Those situations. So
these shows and these discussions go full circle sometimes. I want to go back to the 4th and 1 play that Mariota made. So a few years ago, when he was the quarterback of the Falcons, he came here. They were getting set to play the Commanders. And in reviewing them and getting set to play them, there's one thing, it's a superpower of his that he's amazing at. And I would put him in the class with a couple of others since zone read became a big deal in the NFL. Jalen Hurts a few years ago when they did this often, and Daniel Jones are amazing at the fake on the zone read and keeping it. And yesterday, in a pivotal moment when they needed to have it, he pulled down the superpower, so much so that you could see on tape one of the Cowboys members of the secondary celebrating, thinking they got to stop on 4th down, and all of a sudden going, oh, you know what? He's free, and running down the field and looked like he was going to score. He pulled off. This was old Mariota. He was amazing at this when he was a regular starter. It was the most dangerous thing about his game was the zone read keep, because he is unbelievable at that fake, and they got it at just the right time yesterday.
Man, he's they talk about the 10,000 hours type of situation where you become an expert at something. You need to be, have 10,000 hours. Marcus Mariota probably has, let's call it 30 or 40,000 hours of expertise in running the zone read, going all the way back to his days at Oregon, running under Chip Kelly and running that offense. So this is his world. He is an expert. He can teach a PhD level class and a higher, I don't know what's beyond a PhD, but he can teach that type of class and the art of running the zone read. The fake and the ability. The Cowboys had two guys there ready to stop that run play. One guy took the dive for the running back, and another guy was there for Mariota, but his ability to manipulate him, get loose, and he's let's call it maybe 6 years ago. I think Marcus scores on that, but Father Time is undefeated, so he got everything he could got out of that run play, but great situational awareness and understanding. Hey, if this guy crashes down, and you got to make that decision. He has to make that decision in a split second, whether to hand the ball off to the running back or keep it.
He's another one too. Like, this season is about a lot of things, like rebirth, recalibration, whatever they want to call it. Everything's new. There were a lot of established, really good veterans, some that are going to be in the Hall of Fame, who decided to come here. And he's one of them that was sold. And a couple of years ago, he left Atlanta early when he lost his job, the last starting job that he had. He's openly, I read a piece in the Washington Post where he kind of opened up about needing to find the joy of the game again. Zach Ertz, the last couple of weeks, has talked about rekindling the joy of the game by playing here again. We've talked a lot this season about Bobby Wagner. He'd never played on the East Coast. He was sold on Dan Quinn and Joe Witt and wanting to come here to play. He's played he's been a leader on this team, a heartbeat of the team. Austin Eckler came back from what was a scary hit, about 4 weeks ago, played yesterday. He gives me a lot of hope for the rush offense now that he's available again, moving in to the postseason. There's a lot of stories here, but Marcus Mariota symbolizes a lot to me too. I was so happy for him. Like, everybody saw that clip from a week ago where right before the pass to Zach Ertz to beat the Falcons, he's the one standing there trying to get Jaden, stand up, get your win together, one more play, make it happen, win it for us. And I was like, it felt so right that when they showed the sideline after Mariota does it, there's Jaden, 2 arms up, cheering for his guy. I mean, this is a team in every sense of the word. And we have this amazing rookie. We've got this new coach preaching something that they've bought into. And we've got these veterans, some of them that have been around the block, wondering what's left for them in the sport and doing things like this because they love playing again. It's just, the whole thing is just such an incredible story, really.
It is. And it's a true testament to Dan Quinn. DQ and Adam Peters, they identified the players. And a lot of these players were guys that they had intimate knowledge of. Some of the guys that they brought in from Dallas. Brian Johnson worked with Mariota in Philadelphia, so he knew him. Cliff Kingsbury had the connection with Zach Ertz. OZ was with Quinn in Atlanta. So, and Bobby Wagner had been with DQ and also with Ken Norton Jr., the linebacker coach. So a lot of the veteran guys they had intimate knowledge. They had worked with these guys before. They knew what type of players these guys were. More importantly, they knew what type of locker room guys they are. They knew what type of role they were playing, building the type of culture that they want to build in Washington. And that's extremely important. There's a lot of guys who, you see every time some guy's released, whether it's think about the kid Deontay Johnson, good football player for he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers, went to Carolina, went to Baltimore, now he's in Houston. He gets released. Everybody, hey, we need a receiver, go pick him. I don't know Deontay Johnson personally, but maybe Washington is like, this guy is not going to be a good fit for what we want to do and how we want to operate, the culture that we want to bring in, the type of guys that we want to have on our locker room. And I'm just saying this from that standpoint. Again, I don't know Deontay Johnson. Great talent, a heck of a football player. But you have to make sure you got the right guys. It's not just all about having the most talented football teams. You have to have the right players and right people if you to build it the right way.
There's a lot of everything going on here for the history of the franchise. Like, there's this famous George Allen quote from back in the 70s where you hear him yelling, 53 men together can't lose. And this feels this way about this team. I talked about this a couple weeks ago with you. I got to cover the Joe Gibbs teams 2.0, the second time around when he was coaching here. And you were here too. And, and this is what people talked about with him, that he always said this. It was one of his lines he always said. He goes, you have to pick people, because that's a really hard thing to do. You have to pick people to play. And to your point, like, I got to give the front office credit. Like, they have circled people that they wanted to bring in here. They heard a lot of things about them. Zach Ertz can't play anymore. Even they admitted last week we weren't sure he'd be more than just a red zone threat or a third down threat. It materialized into something more than that. Everyone said Austin Eckler didn't have anything left in the tank. He clearly does. Anthony Lynn knows him, knows what he can be for this team. They knew what Bobby Wagner could be. You're not just picking anybody to fill holes. You have to pick people who want to be there, want to be part of it, who are going to buy into this. And that never gets old. And it is always, always the secret to the teams that win. Go look at what's happening in Detroit. This happened there a few years ago, and it's turned into them being a juggernaut now.
No, you're right on. Even going back to, I'll throw myself in the mix. The reason I ended up in Washington was because Greg Williams was my head coach in Buffalo. Jerry Gray was my defensive coordinator. So Greg comes to Washington. He becomes the defensive coordinator there. Jerry Gray is the coach in the secondary. And there was other guys on the staff. Danny Smith, who's a great special teams coach. They knew me from Buffalo. Steve Jackson, safeties coach. They knew me from Buffalo. And they knew what that defense was missing. And they had identified, they knew, like, hey, what we're missing, London Fletcher will provide that and more. And so it's a when you have people that are going to advocate for you, they know what you're about, and it's just even you look at the guys who are holdovers who they hadn't worked with. I know the roster's been changed over a lot, but there are guys mainstays. Whether it's Terry, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, some of the guys that were here before, Sam Cosmi, guys who were holdovers from the previous regime, but you identify and know that these are core guys that we can build with. These are still the type of players that we know will be a part of our culture and can be a part of something special.
And one of those is Terry. It needs to be mentioned. 3 seconds left in the season. He sets a franchise record with his 13th receiving touchdown. No receiver in the history of the franchise had ever done that before. He was tied with 4 others. 2 of them are in the Hall of Fame, Charlie Taylor and Bobby Mitchell. And then there's this stat, and this is amazing. He's one of 4 wide receivers ever to have 75 plus receptions and 1,000 plus receiving yards in 5 of their first 6 seasons. The other 3 names are Brandon Marshall, Torrey Holt, and the great Randy Moss. It's funny, like clearly he's someone who's going to join you in the Ring of Fame here one day. I mean, that's just no doubt in my mind that's going to happen. Yeah. And then, will he ever get a Hall of Fame candidacy? If he does, and he might have the numbers that would support that by the end of all of it, I'm going to point to not only numbers like that, but go, and here are the list of quarterbacks he played with doing that.
That right there, that right there should be like, okay, let's stap this with Terry. Because I played with Torrey. Torrey was a rookie when I was with the St. Louis Rams, and I played 3 seasons with Torrey, and so I know the quarterbacks that he was catching balls from. One of them is enshrined in Canton and Kurt Warner, but and Brandon Marshall and T.O. I mean, not T.O., but Brandon Marshall and also Randy Moss. They played with some good quarterbacks, and nobody has had the list of quarterbacks like Terry McLaurin. No disrespect to anybody, but when you go down the list, man, I don't even know. Heck, you probably know how many quarterbacks it has been. But I'll say this: if Terry and Jaden can have, man, a long career, whether it's 8, 10, 9, 10 years together, whatever the case may be, and Terry doesn't look like to be slowing down. If those guys can build a nice resume together, then I think we'll be in the conversation, because Terry's going to put up great numbers, and then we'll be like, okay, yeah, let's get him measured for his jacket.
Okay, let's get to a couple other things that are kind of the hanging chad for me of the game yesterday. Well, I want to mention we're taping this before Dan Quinn does his Monday afternoon, day after press conference. I'm certain he's going to address this again. It wasn't addressed completely, I think, after the game because again, amazing win, amazing comeback, 12th win of the season. Hadn't done that since 1991. I mean, there was a lot there to talk about heading into the playoffs and then waiting for the playoff picture to materialize to now know we're playing Tampa. So, what did you make of the decision at the time to make a switch at quarterback at half?
Well, I was a little confused as to why they did it. I didn't know because it didn't look like at that point. Didn't look like Jaden took a hit or anything like that. It was like, what's going on? Still close ball game, a 6-3 ball game at that point in time. So you're wondering what was this about? Was it a situation where you're like, okay, we're going to preserve him. We want to make sure and ensure that he's healthy and whole when it comes time to play next week, whoever we're playing in the playoffs. I was wondering if that was the case. And I was like, did they just weren't happy with the offense, the way it was rolling? So all these scenarios are coming up, and I'm in my mind. I'm also saying I don't think it was a situation where, the offense not playing well, where you can look at it and say, hey man, that was a Jay not being on point, because there were protection issues, there were all kind of things that were happening. He had a couple off-target throws to Terry in particular, but so there's a lot of different scenarios running through my mind, and I wanted to hear what the reasoning was behind it as well.
This is the second time, too. I think I said this during the broadcast with you. I don't know why this is a bad matchup for them, but it is because it's the second time now that they played Dallas this year and got off to a really slow start. Couldn't really protect the quarterback early in either game. Odigizua had a big game against them the first time around. Micah Parsons had 2 sacks on the opening drive. There was consistent pressure. They haven't been able to get the run game going against them. So I don't know what you're seeing against Dallas or whatever Dallas is doing, but it has stunted them twice now in both of those games.
Yeah, and first, I think it starts first and foremost with just not consistently winning the matchups up front and in the trenches, especially from an offensive line standpoint, in terms of being able to run the football. So there's too many occasions where, whether you go back to the game at Northwest Federal Stadium or the game yesterday in Dallas, we just haven't been able to run the football against them consistently enough, and we've been operating in too many second and obvious passing situations or third and longer. And the thing that they do, they have this great guy, man. There's some guys that you have no answer to, and that's Michael Parsons. So he's going to win his one-on-one battles, and they do a great job of moving him around. They're not just, hey, he's going to be at defensive end, we can chip him with a running back, we can slide the protection to him. We do all those types of different things. They lined him up on his second sack. They lined him up over to Michael Dieter, the center. And so Michael Dieter, good football player, but that's asking a lot to have him try to block Michael Parsons one-on-one. And it's a third and, I can't remember the down of this, but it was a third and longer situation. So, he's going to have to, he's going to hold the ball a little bit longer to let those routes develop. So that's between not being able to establish the run to operating a lot more third and threes or less, and being at too many third and longs, and also them having a great football player. I'll go back to this though, as it relates to Jaden, and Dan talked about Jaden having some soreness in his leg. I went back and it looked like he might have taken a shot to the thigh area earlier in that ball game. So that thigh bruise, if it turns out that it was he just said leg, he didn't say what part, but it looks like he takes a shot to his leg, and in particular, I think it might be in the thigh area, and that could have gotten worse on him as the game progressed. Especially you go into halftime, you got a 10, 12 minute period where that thing can stiffen up on you. So I think it was more of a byproduct of that and Dan being true to form. Like, hey, he got some leg soreness. they're getting after the quarterback. We're going to need to have a mobile quarterback, and if he can't operate fully and function fully like he needs to be, then we got Marcus here for a reason. Let's go with him.
I mentioned earlier, we want to see, I think getting Austin Eckler back is going to be a big deal for this team. For the run game, I want to read you Brian Robinson's numbers since the bye. 21 carries, 65 yards in the win over New Orleans. 10 for 24 win over the Eagles, 13 for 60 win over the Falcons. That's 4.6 a carry. That's pretty good. Just 5 for 10 against Dallas. Again, the offense was really slow moving, but the rush offense, this is a team that ended up top 5 rush offense numerous times early in the season. As a team, they went over 200 yards rushing over and over, and it was part of the reason why they kept winning time of possession. They were gashing people. They were having the fast starts they were looking for. Overall, what are you seeing with the run game, and why is it, outside of the unscripted stuff that Jaden and Marcus did yesterday, what are you seeing with the run game right now?
Well, it's a combination of a lot of different things. It's, first and foremost, not winning enough at the point of attack and not getting enough movement. You want to have their defensive line moving back, yard, 2 yards, 3 yards. So there's too many times where running backs are getting contact at or behind the line of scrimmage. There's some issues where sometimes they aren't IDing or targeting the right guy in their run plays. Especially, we run a lot of counters and things where we're pulling linemen, pulling tight ends, pulling. So you have to know and be on the same page of, hey, who you're going to block once you get to that next level, the second level. Not enough times we're not coming off of some of our double team blocks, working up to the second level quick enough. So there's been things like that. And it's also maybe the running back not being patient enough to allow these blocks to develop, bouncing outside too quickly when, hey, if you be just a little bit more patient. Dallas running back did a great job of this yesterday, Rico Dotto. He was very patient, letting his blocks develop. And there were times where, he's so patient, you think he's going one way, and then it creases you. He gets back into a hole, lets the hole develop. So maybe not having enough patience from a running back standpoint, let those blocks develop, let the offensive line get moving. So it's not just one thing, it's multiple things that has really hampered us in the games we haven't been able to run the ball effectively in these last, let's call it last, with the exception of last week where we rushed for 216.
Right, but that was 120. That was 127 from Jaden, and that was a lot of unscripted scramble runs. And that was, that includes all sorts of scrambles that he's just making with his legs.
He also had some success in the design run plays and his own reads and stuff like that. But that throughout last week and throughout Tennessee, and we really haven't had a lot of success outside of Jaden running the football.
Yeah,
the last 6 or 7 weeks.
Yeah, early in the season, the reason why I was buying in big time was, one, they're winning games late, so they're showing this propensity to win late. Jaden is showing this obvious talent that he can literally do anything. He's beyond his years. And then there's always this. In January, a run game travels. They had the number 3 rush offense for the season in Washington history. 2,619 yards, a crazy number that they had. But the vast majority of that was coming early in the season. They were winning. They were dominating time of possession against certain teams. Yeah. They were holding the ball for, they had the most 10 plus play drives for a long period of time in the season. They were winning time of possession by a large margin for the majority of the season. A lot of those early 4th down conversions were because it was all 4th and 1s. They were it was their own version of kind of tush push. They were able to extend all these drives. And remember, early too, when they talk about those slow starts, we always talked about they were constantly in 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, constantly. Yeah. That's not been happening the last few weeks.
Yeah, and I hate to be a bearer of bad news. Tampa Bay's the 4th ranked run defense in the National Football League. They only give up about 98 yards per game rushing. And even to dig deeper into that, their last 3 games, Brad, take a guess. What do you think they've allowed per game rushing over their last 3 games? Take a guess.
I don't know, but I do know that Alvin Kamara wasn't playing yesterday. I know that part.
Man. Take a guess. There's 2 other games that What'd you say?
50?
44.7.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah.
Good.
They've traditionally
Close
been
guess.
great against the run. Where their issue is going to be next week, and we'll get into it in a minute, is they're depleted in their secondary. They've got a lot of injuries on the back end. They're down to like third string, fourth string safeties, things like that. Their corners have been hurt. So we may be asking Jaden in the pass offense to kind of be Supermanish this week.
All right. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Their passing defense is not that great. They're 29th in the league.
That's
pass
right.
defense. So
yeah, well, I mean, like they play. Actually, it's funny. London. They play. We talked about this at the beginning of the season. Like Todd Bowles is Todd Bowles. Like they're going to blitz. They do that. That is not really in fact. It ended up this year not really being in fashion of what a lot of the NFL teams were doing, especially early. Remember, everybody was complaining that everyone was dropping everybody back, and everyone was screaming that they needed to change a rule because nobody could hit a big play. Things have changed a little bit here, but they pressure, and so they were kind of out of style early in the season. And now that they have all these injuries on the back end, they're playing with fire. Like bringing all those blitz packages with corners and safeties that are deep down on their depth chart. Good luck with 17 and the way Diami's playing or the way Zacchaeus is playing right now. Good luck with that if you're not going to get home against our guy.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And, some guys, they're going to do what they do. And this is kind of their DNA as a defense coordinator. Todd Bowles, he's that's always been his mantra, to be high pressure, bring a lot of pressure. And regardless, sometimes when you're depleted in the secondary, being more aggressive actually is the answer, because you're saying, hey, I know my guys probably aren't going to be able to cover long enough. So to try to play zone coverage and they don't have like some top end rush guy. They don't have a Micah Parsons, somebody that they can consistently say, hey, go out, win your one-on-one matchups. We can play coverage behind you. We don't have to bring pressure. They have to bring pressure. They blitz the second most in the National Football League behind the Minnesota Vikings, and that's just who they are. That's how they feel like they have to kind of win the drives, win that down, is to bring pressure, limit the ability for a quarterback to sit back there and pat the football, because they don't have just a dominant pass rusher or two. They have to bring 5-6 man pressures.
So the other thing from yesterday that I want to get to before we move on to the playoffs was, I think the team was saved by their red zone defense yesterday. Dallas moved 100%. The ball effectively, got into the red zone 6 times, only ended up scoring 1 touchdown. I agree with you about Rico Dowdle. Actually, second half of the season, he was actually very good for them, very productive. Mm-hmm. He rushed for over 800 yards in the second half of the season. He wasn't scoring a lot of touchdowns. He did yesterday. I think that's a difference for them in the red zone. They don't seem to have a finisher anymore, kind of like what Zeke used to be for their team. Mm-hmm. Dowdle's very good in between the 20s, but they don't really have a finisher down there. That kind of materialized a little bit yesterday. I think Lance's inexperience also probably helped Washington a little bit inside the 20s, but I want to give credit where credit's due. The red zone defense, which has struggled this year, is ranked among the 5 worst in the league, really stepped up yesterday and gave the offense a chance to pull it out yesterday.
No, that one holding them to 1 touchdown in 6 tries. That's outstanding. You play that type of red zone defense, you're going to beat the majority of teams, especially on a flip side. We're scoring in the red zone. Our ability to score touchdowns in the red zone, we're gonna beat teams. The thing that, and I know Joe Witt is not happy about it. You mentioned Dallas being able to move the football against us. Some of it was, we're still not playing a run to the level we need to, and you want to win a road playoff game, and you touched on that. Got to be able to run the football. You got to be able to stop the run, and also your defense has to get some turnovers. But those are two, and not just, if you want to win a road playoff game, got to be able to run the football. Got to be able to stop the run. The reason you need to be able to run the football, because you're most of the time in a hostile environment. You don't want the crowd to be able to affect and impact your offense in passing situation, obvious passing situation. You don't want to be in a bunch of third and long situation, and it also takes the crowd out of the game, and it wears down the defense. If you can lean on those guys, run the football effectively. So that's part of why you need a bit of run the ball. But going into a place, going into a hostile environment, you got to be able to stop that run, especially on the road, and get after the defense, get after that quarterback, and be able to get some turnovers. It's hard to rush the passer and get turnovers when they're in a bunch of 3rd and 1s, 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s.
That opener feels like 8 years ago now, but one of the keys to the loss was Tampa Bay scored almost every time they got into the red zone. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans had their way. Chris Godwin had a good game. Obviously, he won't be playing in this one. We only saw the beginning stages of Bucky Irving. He was a backup at that point in the opener. Rashad White was the lead back. Bucky Irving now has become the lead back for them. Had an outstanding rookie season, most rush yards by any rookie in the NFL. They actually have a legitimate run game, first time in a while that Tampa Bay's kind of been like that. They're a diverse offense, and they prolifically score. Baker Mayfield has 41 touchdown passes this year. Like they can score. So I'm expecting somewhat of a track meet here, unless things change, which at this point in the season, I got a hard time buying that Washington turns around and becomes like a top 10 run defense all overnight.
I'm hoping they do. I would say this though, you remember this. We had probably 5, 6, 7 opportunities to sack Baker in that game.
Yes.
And he was able to elude the rush, and he made a lot of plays just being able to escape the rush. And you do that, and that's a different ball game. Jaden is light years ahead of where he was from week 1 to week 9 to where we're at right now. We're a better football team. I think Tampa's a better football team. So they've dealt with some injuries. We're dealing with some injuries. I'm looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a fun game. There'll be opportunities, especially if Tampa, I know they're going to change some things up, but in that first game, there were opportunities for Jaden to make some plays in a passing game that for him at that stage, he didn't feel comfortable taking some chances on maybe a tight window throw or throwing a guy open. He's coming from the collegiate level where a lot of these guys are throwing to receivers that are a lot more wide. They're wide open. Whereas in the NFL, those windows, that separation is going to be a lot closer. Anticipation throws. He's a much better scrambler and keeping his eyes down the field. I know that's something they harp on and constantly rep him in practice and remaining a passer outside of the pocket. So Jaden is light years ahead of where he was, and I think defensively we're going to definitely have to run the ball. I mean, stop the run better because Tampa ran the ball effectively against us. That was kind of the start of when we dealt with the trap blocks and all those the outside runs that we had a lot of extreme difficult stopping in that game.
Yeah, I think the other thing just to point out, and we learned this early, you mentioned it, like they didn't wrap up Baker Mayfield. They could have had 5 sacks in that game and just didn't wrap him up behind the line of scrimmage. What you'll see with him this year too, there's a little bit of like the Josh Allen, most quarterbacks slide or avoid contact. He does not. Like he leans into it and almost welcomes it. So you have to be careful because if you touch the quarterback the wrong way, you get a 15-yard penalty. But he invites it, and he doesn't mind the contact. You got to know who you're playing. You're like, Jaden's going to go down. He's going to go out of bounds. Most quarterbacks will avoid the contact. This guy won't, actually. He invites it.
He wants to smoke, huh?
Yes, he does.
Well,
you like that. I can see the smile on your face.
Yeah, no, I would say this. That's part of playing with an edge too, how he's. I think his teammates rally around him doing that type of thing. Yeah, that's risky because you get caught by a linebacker or a defensive lineman, and he's too valuable. But they feed off of that when he's running around making a play, taking on a linebacker, doing those types of things, taking on a safety or whatever, and hopping up and doing his celebration afterwards, but. It's definitely a risk reward type of scenario, but yeah, I would love that as a linebacker for the quarterback, and knowing that he's not going to slide, that he's gonna go and try to run me over or try to get all he can out of that play.
One more player before I forget from yesterday, because I just wanted to mention early in the half, boy, Washington really just couldn't move the ball. It was 65 yards or something like that at halftime. That's all they were able to manage. But one guy who really stood out was DiAndre Brown, who had missed the week before, was really kind of a spark plug for them. They were looking for ways to get him the ball. He was coming through for them. And I just want to say this to him, like, in my book, you have your first career touchdown pass. That I believe in my world, that happened. So I feel bad that officially that did not happen for you yesterday.
Hey, man. Great play call. I mean, great play call, schemed up, and DiAndre threw. I'll say this, the ball was a little different. It came out a little different because he's a lefty, and it wasn't like a tight spiral. And OZ, you don't want to talk about how difficult it is to look up and try to locate the football, and it has this funky rotation on it. And so, I mean, you could tell that OZ was having a little bit of trouble tracking that ball when he even before it got to him. You could tell he was like not all the way certain. There's almost like an outfielder. There's a deep fly out, and you're like, man, I think I got it. Next thing you know, it drops, and he just had trouble tracking it. So if you want to say that was a touchdown in your book, go ahead. In
my book, DiAndre gets a touchdown pass there.
But he did.
I'll hear you on it. Here's what I'll say about that place in general. It's very distracting there. Looking up.
A lot of things going on.
There's a lot of things happening there.
Yeah, I will say this though. DiAndre did provide juice to the offense. There was I rewatched some of the offense earlier today, and there was a screen they threw to him, man, and he was one block away. He actually had the block. It just the lineman, the defender did a nice job running to the football. It actually was Mozzie Smith. He came out of there and he was hauling. Mozzie made this tackle. If Mozzie doesn't make this play, I think DiAndre with his speed, he's going to score because he looked like I'm not sure if the safeties would have had the right angle to catch him, but he did provide spark and juice to the offense yesterday.
I tell you too, just playing there, that stadium's amazing. I love it, but I don't know how you guys keep any kind of focus in that place. Like, hey man, between the big screen, even Logan and during a timeout was like, I think Netflix is here shooting season 2 of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader show. And he's standing there and like, obviously that's what he's looking at the moment. Like, I don't know how in the world you can keep your head on straight in that stadium.
Logan was looking at the Netflix camera, and that's what you have to do. You have to be a professional when you go into any environment. Be a pro.
I told him though, he's like, I think the Netflix cameras are here and I don't want to be in that. And I go, they don't want you in it either. they're not focusing on you. they want you out of the shot.
They'll have to blur him out.
Yeah. They're like, you're just adding extra work to get out of the way. All right. So, and now what I hope is not going to be the last time, because I'm confident we're going down to Tampa. We're going to be doing this again next week, talking about whatever the next opponent is. For the final time in the regular season, it is time for Big Fletch's Heavyweight Commander Championship belt, presented by Northwest Federal Credit Union, where trust matters. The reigning champ was Jaden Daniels because of all the magic act that he had pulled. I got a feeling he's in trouble of retaining the belt this week because there's other contenders.
He is, man. There was, Jaden, he's the reigning champ, and yesterday he wasn't able to go the distance, and so there was some challengers. There was a couple strong challengers and contenders, but I had to choose one. Marcus Mariota was a consideration, and he did some great things in that ball game. But the guy that I'm going to choose to be the contender for Big Fletch's Heavyweight Commanders Championship belt, I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin. Terry had 8 receptions, 62 yards on 12 targets. Obviously, the game winner that he had a vice grip on that catch, and Jaden, the numbers just don't allow him to retain the belt. So, without further ado, and new heavyweight championship commanders big flash belt, however you want to call it, is for him. He also set the franchise record in receiving touchdowns with that game-winning touchdown. Broke the franchise record, or set a new franchise record. So, the belt goes from Jaden Terry.
Whatever you want to call it. It's your championship belt. And you're like, whatever you want to call it.
it's the Big Fletcher's heavyweight championship commander's belt, or commander's heavyweight championship belt.
Yeah, rolls right off the tongue.
There's a lot of words into it. And I'll have what I call it in front of me.
Oh, man. All right. Before we go, let's talk about the playoffs a little bit. You had experience playing in them. What is the big difference? Because this is now, I mean, a lot of the players on this team have a lot of experience doing it. Eckler played in them. Ertz, a number of the players here have done it. But for the group that's been here, this is new. And for this organization, it's first time in 4 years. So what do you think, number one, is the big difference between regular season and playoff football?
Well, there's going to be, the intensity definitely ramps up. It's just, that's how it is. You look at even preseason and regular season, there's a different intensity. But from regular season to postseason, the intensity, the attention to detail has to be a lot greater. The stakes are a lot higher. You have to be ultra focused because there are going to be so many, a lot more interviews you have to do. The media obligations kind of ramp up a little bit, where guys who are used to hiding from the media, they won't necessarily have that ability to do that, because they will have to, be available to the media. So there's more responsibility you have to deal with. And just understanding that, yes, a playoff game, but once the ball is snapped and the ball is kicked off, it's still a game of football, still the same game. So don't go in and try to do too much. Oftentimes you'll see guys like, especially defensive players, trying to do too much. I want to make a play. I want to make a splash play. Everybody's watching. I want to make an interception. I want to make a sack. And they neglect their responsibility, or don't completely carry out their responsibility, or try to make a play that's not their play to be made. So you have to be focused, pay attention to details, let the plays come to you. They'll come to you by doing your job first and foremost. So the main thing is not trying to do too much. And I'm sure you have enough guys with experience. DQ, he's coaching the Super Bowl. He's won the Super Bowl. I think he was with Seattle when they won the Super Bowl. And they've done it a long time. Bobby Wagner has all this playoff experience. Zach Ertz, Super Bowl winning player. So you have a lot of guys with playoff experience to reiterate that message of just not trying to do too much and staying focused on the attention to details.
Last few weeks when I talked to Dan Quinn to get ready for the broadcast, specifically against Dallas, specifically against Philadelphia. Okay, so teams that they're your rivals. This will be the second time around with them. These are teams also that are kind of notorious for getting into extracurriculars and potentially goading you into penalties, right? And he had talked openly about, they've talked a lot about the penalties. Like he's not bothered by anything in game that's physical, and if there's a mistake that's made, whatever, but it's done in the act of playing. What they don't like are pre-snap penalties, and they don't like these retaliatory penalties. They had one yesterday against Dallas. Deron Payne got into one on a special teams play that led to a different kickoff, right? He wants to avoid all that stuff. I don't walk into this worried openly about that because of the opponent, with one exception. So Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans do not like each other. And this goes back for years. It'll be detailed ad nauseum throughout the week if he is going to indeed play, which sounded like he's tracking towards being healthy, and hopefully they need him, I think, hopefully playing. This is going to be an interesting storyline to watch. Mike Evans has been kicked out of games against the Saints when he and Marshawn Lattimore get into it. So that is going to be something to watch very closely this weekend.
No, absolutely. And I hope Marshawn is out there playing. Seems like they know how to get under each other's skin a little bit. they've had all those battles when they were playing in the same division, the NFC South. But it'll be a great individual battle if that's the case where Marshawn is out there, and I'm sure the Todd Bowles is talking to Mike Evans saying, "Hey, if Marshawn plays, you got to maintain your composure. You can't go out here getting 15-yard personal foul penalties. You can't risk being ejected from that football game." So, that's the conversation that you'll definitely want to have with your guys. You want them to play with intensity, play with the edge a little bit, but don't cross the line because it can be too costly for your football team.
And the last one, I just want to point out a matchup, like people aren't going to be thinking about him. Chris Godwin's not out there. Jalen McMillan is a high draft pick of theirs. We had heard, because we went into the opener against them, from their people, they were telling us they loved him coming out of college. They were convinced he was going to be a high level number 3. Godwin gets hurt. He in de facto becomes their number 2. Last 5 games of the season, he has scored a touchdown in each one of them and has 7 over 5 games. He's a problem. So it's not just Mike Evans. They target this guy heavily, and he's been scoring a ton. We got to pay a lot of attention to him this weekend.
Yeah, they definitely haven't pay a lot of attention. I'll say this, though. If you're able to have Marshawn out there, he can match up with Mike Evans, that'll allow you to do some things, maybe roll some coverages to a Jalen McMillan. See, is he able to deal with the pressure of having coverage rolled to him? He's a rookie. Rookies, are you going to be able to deal with that type of added attention that you may get if we say, hey, we don't have to have extra resources committed to stopping Mike Evans if Marshawn is able to play. Now we can deploy a little bit more resources to make sure we X you out and see if Tampa Bay can get productivity out of their third receiver, their third pass catcher. So it'll be a great game planning week for the defensive coaches, for the offensive coaches, and that's the beauty of this game, man. That's what I miss. Like, people ask me all the time, like, what do you miss? But the thing that I probably miss the most is the game planning piece of it, where you're studying on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even Saturday, the opponent, and trying to figure out what they do well, how you can combat that, things that you can do against them to cause them problems. You're constantly kind of putting your defense against certain plays, and like, okay, they do this, we can do that, and vice versa. That's the piece that I miss the most, is the game planning piece, and that's the beauty of this great game we have that we play.
What do you think either team can get out of rewatching week 1 against one another?
They'll get a lot out of it. Yeah, they'll definitely get a lot out of it. I think, as I mentioned, with Jaden, that being his first NFL start, he's going to get a ton out of it, because from a defensive standpoint, there's only so many coverages that you can throw at somebody. So a lot of the coverages that Tampa played in that game, there'll be a lot of the coverage they play in this game. So Jaden will have better answers and know how to deal with those coverages this time around. Matchups, individual matchups that, hey, you may, whether it's Tyler Biotis knowing how to deal with Vita Vea a second time around, or some of the different blitz packages and blitz looks that they threw at you, pressure looks, from a standpoint of on the other side, on the flip side, us dealing with stopping their run and the ways that they attacked us from a run game. Also, probably maybe having a better or different type of mindset of how to rush Baker Mayfield. That game, we talked about them, probably should have had about 5-6 sacks and not being able to corral Baker. So having played him already once and realizing, hey, okay, maybe I need to slow it down a hair, a half a step as I get closer to him. So having that week 1 matchup and being able to look at that film, it's gonna be big for both teams.
Yeah, I mean, and then the last thing really is, if I didn't know any better, the way that this team ends every game, I would think they're doing it on purpose. So if this game doesn't come down to the last possession, or in the case of this team, the last play, that would actually be a surprise to me.
Oh man, You know what, man? I don't know how many more of these I can handle.
I mean, the fact that we don't have a sponsor for blood pressure pills is amazing to me.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, but don't speak too soon. We might have one.
Should have had one weeks ago.
Hey, Commanders fan. Do you have high blood pressure when watching Commanders fan? Do you have high blood pressure when watching your team play? Such and such. We're here for you.
Yeah. I'm going to have to read a disclaimer. If you listen to this broadcast, it could affect your health. Right. It's pretty wild. All right. It's been an amazing season. Can't wait for the playoffs. I'll see you in Tampa, London.
Let's go.